Welcome to Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. Legal issues simplified through real client stories and real-world experiences. Creating simplicity in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to another episode of Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. I'm your host, ByrdAdatto, with my co-host, Michael Stephen Byrd.
Thanks, Bradford. As a business and healthcare law firm, we meet a lot of interesting people and learn some amazing stories. In today's special episode, we're going to talk with Paco Canales and Heather Furness, longtime clients and two of our favorite people.
Awesome. I'm perfect. And before we get started, Michael, do you know the game Two Truths and a Lie?
Yes, because I always think I'm going to dominate when I play it, and I lose every time. I know my 11-year-old Alex has asked to play this recently because she has recently become vegan, and that's about every other sentence coming out of her is talking about vegan, and I think she believes she'll trick the audience by having that in her list.
All right. Have you already started playing the game? Was that a lie or that a truth that she's now a vegan?
Oh, good one.
Well. Okay, well, let's get started. So this is how the game's going to play. I'm going to give you two truths and a lie about Paco and see if you can guess it. He went to Harvard undergrad, he went to Stanford Med School, and he swam for the Olympics for Puerto Rico.
Brad,
yeah,
I don't think you understand how the game works. Those are all true.
Oh, okay, so those are all true. All right, we'll try Heather now. So for Heather, her father was a renowned plastic surgeon. She met Paco while at Stanford, and she co-authored the book called The Business of Plastic Surgery.
Again, all true, and you wrote a chapter for the book, so you should know better.
That's true.
I think you're just trying to steal my introduction. I will finish making the introduction so then we can start talking to Paco and Heather. So Paco and Heather are a husband and wife team. They are leaders in plastic surgery. Heather, kind of her stats, she went to Stanford undergrad, UCLA Medical School, and then Stanford Plastic Surgery for residency. Paco was Harvard undergrad, Stanford Medical School, and Stanford Plastic Surgery for residency. They live in Santa Rosa, California. They have adult children, Diego, who coincidentally went to Stanford, and Sienna, who went to Harvard. And I wonder if there was some parental influences going back and forth on which school they would go to. Welcome, Paco and Heather.
Oh, thank you, Michael.
I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you, Brad.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I'm curious, and I've never asked you guys this question. How did that work, going through residency and starting a relationship that obviously later turned into marriage?
Well, it was great. Initially, we worked closely together. We never had to worry about going out on dates because we were always together, always in the hospital. But as soon as we got married, they kind of arranged things so that we were at separate hospitals, and I think it was their means of birth control.
Yeah, also the call schedule in the hospital tended to be every third for Heather and every fourth for me. So basically we were completely off cycle, other than that first few months when we started dating and we were in the hospital at all times. So yeah, it created for interesting times.
I guess you got back to those early days when you decided to go into practice together.
We did. That's one thing we realized. Working separately all the time in different hospitals showed us that we really wanted to work together, because that's how we started out. We were working together on pediatric surgery, and it's been great.
Yeah, we started out in Boston at Beth Israel Hospital with Bob Goldwyn and Sumner Slavin, and we came back to California after we took our boards, and we've been here ever since.
That's awesome. Well, thanks again for being here, guys. And so our theme for our podcast this season is thinking outside the box. And we thought of you guys because y'all have had a quite incredible past few years with a lot of run with some life obstacles that started in October 2017 when you lost your home in Northern California based on the Tubbs fire. And for our audience that does not remember, the Tubbs fire was a combination of a dozen large fires all across almost 8 different counties of Northern California, almost simultaneously. And the fire inflicted massive damage in Northern California, including Santa Rosa community, which I know you guys love because that's where you're from. So I'd love to hear share your experience with our audience, what was happening in 2017.
Yeah, we were at a meeting, ASPS, a national meeting in Orlando when it happened. And Paco got word because a nurse texted in the middle of the night, "Have you guys evacuated?" forgetting that we were out of town. And so he contacted our next door neighbor, who said the fires all over our neighborhood. And later we learned that the entire neighborhood of 1,500 homes went down. There were over 5,300 homes in our county that went down. And the whole area was closed off. And so we stayed in San Francisco during that time and then up to Petaluma Town South until they opened up our area. The National Guard kept close control and only residents were allowed in with a pass. It was very much like war. And so when we finally arrived, we brought our kids out so that we could all go together. And driving through that area where everything had changed and everything smelled like char, I got lost. There was a turn that I had made hundreds of times, but all the landscape was gone. And so I thought, is this the turnoff? Even some of the street signs had melted. And then when we arrived at our property, the whole area was actually like looking at Roman ruins. There were, little bits of pieces of walls and maybe a barbecue and burnt out cars, but it was all gone. It was pretty devastating.
Yeah, when I talked to our neighbor, he was very optimistic, and I said, "How are things?" And he goes, "Well, there's fire on our street, and there was fire when we were leaving because we only got 5 minutes. But I think things are going to be okay." I thought, "Oh my God, there's fire on our street, and you think things are going to be okay?" And sure enough, the entire neighborhood went down, and only about one house out of 200 in our neighborhood made it. And I'm not sure if winds changed and how that house actually made it.
And it was more than just losing a house, because we lost our entire community and we became a diaspora. We still feel that loss. Our neighbors, or some left. A lot of people didn't have insurance that covered the rebuild of their house. And so a lot of them left the state. And then a number of our friends are up and down the area. So we don't have the same walking group and dinner group and all that we used to have.
And one thing that we lost were the memories, because we are of a certain age. Not all of our baby pictures, or all of our baby pictures were in albums or shoe boxes. They were not on Instagram like today's, kids who have their own Instagram from the time they're babies. Heather's a great artist, and the best art that we had, we kept at home. Some of it we kept at the office. So all of that was gone, and that's obviously irreplaceable.
We were suffering from clear PTSD. It was very difficult to make a decision. And we noticed that insurance companies would, send a check. And I think you see a check, you think this is great. And later we had a private adjuster guide us, but we realized they will sort of make moves when you are at your most vulnerable. It was so difficult to make a decision that we would go into a store, and if there was a choice in color of toothbrush, red or blue, it was overwhelming, and we would just walk out.
And one thing that we had was also the office was threatened. The office at least did not burn down, but initially we got photos from our staff of smoke very close to our office, so we thought it was going to be a double whammy, but it turned out just to be our home.
Well, and as you guys know, as someone who is here in Dallas, Texas, because of Katrina, where I lost everything, the memories that you lose, that's the hardest part. And the only good thing I can tell you guys, because All my photo albums were downstairs, and so 2.5 weeks of water, your photos don't survive, much like a fire. All my college pictures of me studying in the library were destroyed. So as I tell my kids, I never would have gone to a party shirtless with a beer can in my hand. No, I was always studying, and right now there is no evidence otherwise. So that was probably the only good thing that came out of Katrina, besides obviously down the road meeting Michael. I understand that the loss of memories, I think I 100% agree with you, is the most impactful thing that happens. And then and the second part is what you just hit, is the loss of your community, because your neighbors, my neighbors, moved all across the United States too afterwards. So I completely understand. I
connect to I was in Orlando. In fact, I was on a panel with Heather like the day before, and I had sat down with Paco right before I left town. And it was the next day that Paco texted me and realized what was happening. And it's just crazy.
Yeah. Something that is so surreal. It takes a while to absorb.
Well, talk about the practice and, how you try to keep a business going amidst all of this.
Well, I guess we can say we kept the business going from the Sheraton in Petaluma. We were sheltered at the Sheraton in Petaluma, which is about 25 minutes away from the office, and we lived in a one-room hotel room for about 6 weeks. Eventually, a friend offered us a cottage in his property, and so a total of about 3 months of being displaced. But as soon as the fire hit, we made some initial phone calls. The first one was to the bank, and we have a very close relationship to our bank. And I asked that our credit line be doubled immediately, knowing that this was going to be a very uncertain time. We didn't know exactly how long our practice was going to be shut down, much less know what effect it was going to have on the psyche of the community, because, as Heather said, 5,000 homes were down, people were displaced. The sense of I lost everything really changed the outlook of the community. So once we got the credit line doubled, and they were initially, the banker didn't answer, and I thought, wow, how can he not answer? Well, he lost his home too, so he left to go to Sacramento, had no access to his work email. But once he got back in, he was very helpful. And the next call was to our vendors, and many of our vendors were very generous, and they were able to extend payment dates for 90 or 120 days. And that really helped with our cash flow and helped us kind of plan. And right after the October fires, we had what we call our Black Thursday event. You want to tell them about that?
Yeah, we have 25 employees. The two of us lost our home, and one nurse did, but nobody else did. And the staff figured that we were not up to having an event. We said, no, we've got to have an event. And we made it about the community and donated money from the proceeds to a fire charity. And we had more people come to that event than ever before. Wow. So there was a real sense of drawing together. A lot of our patients had lost their homes. And so they would come, they would be in tears, really grieving. And I think that there was certainly a bond among our friends, we still call ourselves the homeless friends. And we could certainly share experiences just as we did with our patients.
That's amazing.
Well, and I guess, understanding, and you kind of touched on the fact that you were able to have these great strategies to keep your practice going. But I think, Michael, maybe we can talk about something else happened that same year, but it was in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I mean, that was 4 months later that Puerto Rico was devastated by Hurricane Maria.
Well, it was actually right around the same time, Michael, and at that point I thought God just doesn't like Puerto Ricans because he hit me hard, and Hurricane Maria comes, and as you probably remember, it was a devastating hurricane, and we're used to hurricanes. That whole hurricane season is basically May through November, and we're used to a couple of hurricanes coming by, but this was a Category 5 hurricane. I think the revised death toll was around 3,500 people, and it caused about $1.2 billion in damage. So the island is a small island, 100 miles by 30 miles. We don't have a lot of place to run to or to hide to, so we just basically took it right in the face. And even though my immediate brothers and sisters now live in the States, every cousin I have, aunt and uncle, still in Puerto Rico. And so they went on to a similar situation, living without electricity or water, having generators that they could only run for a few hours during the day. And they were safe, but basically life completely changed. And in some ways, it's never totally gotten back to normal, even 3 years from now. And as we speak, there's a tropical storm, not quite hurricane, bearing down on Puerto Rico right now. So we'll see what the news say later today.
Yeah, and so now you have obviously your homeland, your actual home being destroyed, and unfortunately the obstacles did not stop there for you guys. The next obstacle came with having a steady flow of electricity when you had rolling blackouts start in Santa Rosa. What happened and when was that?
Yeah, they really started with after the Tubbs fire in 2017. The power went out that night, and that actually really impacted people's communication and ability to get people to flee. But you mentioned there were several fires that night, and most of them were found to result from sparks from transformers. So our main gas and electric company, Pacific Gas and Electric, started to shut down grids in order to minimize the sparks depending on the temperature and the winds. And so shutdowns would be with very little warning, and the shutdown could be a day to several days. And then they would be intermittent. And so that's been really challenging because we have to shut our office down. Even if our office has power, a lot of our staff will have kids in schools without power. So it really has impacted our practice during fire season, peak fire season, which is really the end of September to early December. So it's a big chunk of the year.
And we have an office generator, backup generator, much like a hospital, so that we can run our operating room. So if the power went out during surgery, the backup generator comes on. However, we can't run elective surgery on a backup generator. So even if we had power and nobody else around us had power, we're not allowed to start surgery on backup power. So anytime the winds kick up, and the winds on the Tubbs fire and other fires can go up to 70 to 80 miles an hour, PG&E will then shut down the grid. And so it comes down with very little warning. And the trouble is that once the winds pass, it takes 36 hours to get the power back on. So even if you said, okay, the wind went down, so now you're stuck with another 36 hours while they check everything to make sure that there's no damage, and then they turn on the power. So doing this on and off, we had to shut down for about 17 out of 30 days last October, which totally impacted our business.
How do y'all react and respond to that as far as patient communication, employee communication, just normal business operations and even financial projections? How do you deal with all of that?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing, and you hit on it, is communication. And we needed to communicate with our patients, and we needed to communicate with our staff. So the first thing we did is we created an in-house WhatsApp group for all of our staff members so that we could just quickly let people know what was happening, where to show up, where to not show up. And our staff could also let us know about particular patients right on that group, rather than depending on email or a phone call or anything else. So that WhatsApp group was great. And then we have a fairly large social media presence, and we activated all of those channels on Facebook and Instagram in particular, to let our patients know what was happening and to encourage them and allow them to communicate through any way they could. Some people were post-operative, some people had new appointments. So we were able to manage by using Facebook, Instagram, and the WhatsApp group. And I don't know what we would have done 15 years ago because none of this stuff existed.
In our overflow, we could see we have an office in the county south of us. So if somebody really needed sutures out or had a problem, then we would meet them. It's not set up for surgery, so we don't usually see our surgical patients there, but at least we had an option.
Mm. Well, luckily nothing else happened. You got your electricity back on, and then 2019 comes around. Everything's going great until we have another potential fire, the Kincaid fire that comes through. And this time, I found the picture before this podcast of Paco. You sent me a picture of a jet flying over low enough that it was dropping the fire retardant. And you're like, this is exactly a mile from my office as we speak. And I remember thinking, oh, not again. And I'm sure you felt the same way because now we're in 2019 and the fire is heading towards your office.
Yeah, that was a very dicey time because we thought, we've already lost our house and our office was threatened. We were evacuated. Most of the county actually was evacuated, unlike the Tubbs fire where the people in charge of emergency had made the decision not to alert anybody, so that we lost 24 lives in our county that night. And with the Kincaid fire, they were very proactive. That was great. They turned off a lot of the grids and then they just evacuated. But there's a big transformer north of us where that they didn't turn off, and that provides electricity for most of Northern California. That's the spark that started the whole Kincaid fire. So where our old house was threatened, where our office was threatened, and the town of Windsor, just north of us, was also threatened. The people watching the fires, the winds, said that there's a very good chance Windsor is going to go down. But the firefighters used a lot of strategy now that the people were out of the county and they were able to save the town. But we holed up in San Francisco for 2-3 weeks and waited until all of this was over. So it was a huge impact to us, and we knew people who lost homes. One of our friends who lost their home lost their rental home in the Kincaid fire. So it was a double whammy for them. When
you're in San Francisco, are you doing no work? Are you going to your other office? How are y'all? What's going on during that few week period?
Well, at that point, we were doing no work. As far as elective surgery, that was completely shut down. As far as the patients, we could manage a lot of the stuff on the phone. And, excuse me. And if someone really needed to be seen, we could drive up to Marin County to our smaller office and see them there. And our staff is really very good about also helping out. So they could answer minor calls, etc. And they were unfortunately also evacuated from their home, but some of them just came down further south into Marin to relatives' homes. So we kind of managed and manned the command center from San Francisco. And then once we were able to come back, at least we were closer, but yet we would find out on very short notice the power will be off tomorrow, or you'd be in the middle of an afternoon and the power would go off with no rhyme or reason. So it was a little bit stress-inducing, to say the least.
Wow. Well, we move into 2020, and I'm pretty sure you didn't think that the next challenge would involve a word called social distancing.
Yeah.
And
it's been a challenge. This one we've shared with the entire world. So, but what we learned in the past, I think, really helped us, whether COVID, with the WhatsApp group, the communication, just knowing that we'll get through this and trying to be as efficient and proactive as possible?
We had, again, short notice. We knew that things were getting heated, and we knew that COVID was becoming a big concern, particularly in New York. And we made the decision to actually close our practice on the day before St. Patrick's, and the county had not yet announced its shelter in place. And I remember walking outside of our office, and Heather and I just finished a full day of surgery, and we were thinking, should we do surgery tomorrow? Should we not? And we just said, let's not do it. A year from now, doing another day of surgery isn't going to matter. And we shut down on the 16th, and then 24 hours later, our county announced a shelter in place, and we were essentially shut down anyway. So yeah, it was a very difficult time. It was uncharted waters. And like Heather said, it's not just us in Sonoma County. It is everybody in California, everybody in the United States. So the next 2 months were really rocky. We had, as Heather said, we have 25 employees, and we had to lay off or furlough 23 of them.
Yeah, and I remember talking to Paco several times, and at some point, Paco said something that stuck with me because it resonated, and you just shared that you couldn't watch another Zoom or get any more information because it was information overload from every possible angle, whether it was email or webinars for that really 4 to 6 week period after we were all shut down.
I think I listened to over 50 webinars before I was completely fried. After that, I had an exception. I listened to every ByrdAdatto webinar. And I have to thank you guys a lot, because you guys provided a wealth of information, both on the webinars as well as on your website. And lots of issues come up beyond the shutdown of the practice. And there were labor issues, and Renee Coover, who was one of your partners, is a labor specialist, and she provided very valuable advice for us during that time regarding the CARES Act and the modifications and accommodations that needed to be made for employees during COVID. So it was both a challenge on the employee side as well as the patient side. And of course, at least the government came through with some loans. And again, you guys were instrumental in helping us obtain PPP loans.
Well, first off, thanks for the plug on our other the website and the video. So that was nice of you. But yeah, no, it was a crazy time, I think, for everyone. And obviously, we're not exactly through it yet. But I think one thing that, if you can say that, based on since 2017, what you've gone through, it sounds like you've slowly built out certain new strategies or ideas. And I think I've heard it throughout the time, but maybe if you want to kind of summarize some of your all's thoughts of, for everyone else who's out there, what are the things that they should be considering? Because I think y'all hit every single one of them. And I want you to just kind of, if you want to highlight them again, I think for our audience, I think it's really important.
Well, I think having a great relationship with a bank is important. And I think that was really evident during the PPP loan application process. Some of the larger banks that shall remain nameless, but we all know what the large banks are, were attentive to their bigger clients and not so much to their smaller clients. We had a local bank that we worked with for the last 29 years, and they walked us through the process, gave us a little advance warning as to what exactly we would need. So we also had all that paperwork ready, which brings up also that you need to have a really good and close working relationship with your accountant. And meeting with your accountant once a year is no longer the standard like it was when we went into practice many years ago. Now, you need to basically have up-to-date everything because the banks require that.
The other thing that we learned after the Tubbs fire was to have to check your insurance, so your business insurance, homeowners insurance, because if you're just covered for the cost of the building. Well, the building may go up, and certainly the cost of construction will go up with time. And that's one reason so many people, almost all people, were underinsured with the Tubbs fire. And one reason why a lot of people just walked away, sold their lot and walked away. So after the Tubbs fire, we looked at our business, and our private adjuster said that you need to keep the insurance for your business up to date, because it's not just the building you're insuring, but everything inside it, the lasers, the equipment. And so if we had lost our office without updating that, it would have completely wiped us out. So the insurance companies, interestingly, don't want to keep up to date. There must be sort of a magic point where they get enough in premiums, and then if there's a payout, they don't want to pay the large amounts. And so it really behooves you to look out for yourself and make sure that you're in communication with the insurance company and proactively get that coverage up to date. And then having a good relationship with you guys has really helped, so that because legal issues come up that we can't anticipate. And with, it's surprise, we've got COVID, surprise, we've got a fire. And I think asking and finding out and not assuming that you know what's going on has really, really benefited us.
Yeah, I think that the insurance can't be emphasized enough. Things like your general business coverage, business interruption, also things that we always thought would be so unlikely, and yet in the last 3 years we've had 3 different occasions to activate some of these insurance coverages. So that's another thing that we learned, and also going back through your credit card statements and making sure that you're as lean as possible. Credit card recurrent charges accumulate, and then 12 years later, you don't even know what the $100 a month was for, and you've been paying it for an iPad that broke 5 years ago. So those are the main points that we have to make.
Incredible. Thank you so much for sharing. I think there's a lot of wisdom, and I'll add one thing I heard you guys say over and over throughout this episode was just the communication adjustments you guys made along the way, and I think that showed up in the fact that you amidst all these things have patience willing to have elective things done when there's a lot happening in the background. So thank you guys. What we're going to do next, we'll break for commercial, and we'll let you guys go. And on the other side, Brad and I will discuss our observations from a legal perspective. Paco and Heather, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your experiences.
Yes, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Great to see you guys.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Many business owners use legal counsel as a last resort rather than as a proactive tool that can further their success. Why? For most, it's the fear of unknown legal costs. ByrdAdatto's Access Plus program makes it possible for you to get the ongoing legal assistance you need for one predictable monthly fee. That gives you unlimited phone and email access to the legal team, so you can receive feedback on legal concerns as they arise. Access Plus, a smarter, simpler way to access legal services. Find out more. Visit ByrdAdatto.com today.
And welcome back to the Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. I'm still here, ByrdAdatto as one host. My co-host, Michael Byrd's still here. I mean, we just had, I'm so happy that Paco and Heather could join us. And for those of you who don't know them, they're just a joy to be around. But it is, their story and hearing what they went through, it was impactful to us back then. It's still impactful to me just rehearing it today. And so, Michael, let's think about what are some of the takeaways you got out of that episode?
Yeah, the crazy thing is that, the pandemic is still going on. Their office is open, but we're still living a different life, and we don't know when that's going to change. What really struck me and, connects to our theme this season of thinking outside the box is just the adjustments they made to really make sure good communication happened. Using the WhatsApp, making sure, recognizing that there was a strategic advantage by having a local banking relationship when the PPP loans, I don't know, Brad, you probably remember this. There was a mad rush. Everyone was trying to figure out whether it was going to happen. And really at first we thought there was going to be a huge majority of the country that didn't get the PPP. Yep. And Paco was able to pivot, think creatively, go to his banker and make sure that he was one of the first people that we talked to that was funded. Yeah. And so what they've been through is atypical because it's been, lifetime type things happening one after the other since 2017. But it's such a great illustration that even when you're being creative, you're going back to some basic things like good communication. And it reminds me that there's not a huge difference between the creative things we do to think outside the box and the disciplines that we have to keep of thinking inside the box. And it reminds me of some of the stuff we talked about in season 1.
Yeah. And in fact, as they were talking, it reminded me of the episode, Don't Be a Lone Wolf. And the reason why is, look, running a business is difficult. Running a medical practice adds additional layer of difficulty to it. And then finally, you throw in the fact that, fires and brimstone and pandemics all happening. If you're trying to figure out how to do this by yourself, your exposure goes up massively. And in this particular case, I love what Paco was talking about. And Heather, they said, we reached out to our banker, we reached out to our CPA, and we were live with them. We reached out to our attorneys to help us. And they didn't, obviously you still have to kind of walk your own path, but they were able to surround themselves with great advisors and not feel like they had to go it alone. And that's, I think, was the really important takeaway is that I also heard was they could do this, but they could do that by surrounding themselves with good counsel. So, at this time, we're going to wrap up, but I want to thank you again for joining us and looking forward to speaking with you at the next episode. Thanks again for joining us today. And remember, if you like this episode, please subscribe, make sure to give us a 5-star rating, and share with your friends.
You can also sign up for the ByrdAdatto newsletter by going to our website at ByrdAdatto.com.
ByrdAdatto is providing this podcast as a public service. This podcast is for educational purposes only. This podcast does not constitute legal advice, nor does it establish an attorney-client relationship. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by ByrdAdatto. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Please consult with an attorney on your legal issues.